everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Real Conversations about Aging Parents. This is your host, Rebecca Tapia. Thank you so much for joining me again today. I am going to share something hot off the press with you today. Not that it's newsworthy necessarily, but I just recently subscribed to Consumer Reports and got the first edition of the magazine for me, not the first for them, obviously. And it was great. And they're not a sponsor of the show, so I don't earn anything by telling you that this was a great edition that they put out. And I was going to pick any magazine and politely leave it out for somebody who may need it, this would be one of the issues that they sent out. So this was focused a lot on safety. They looked at multiple things like safety with appliances, safety with cars, and then they did a couple pages on home safety, specifically fall prevention. And when I started reading it, I thought, good on you, Consumer Reports. This is excellent information, would be perfect to go over on the podcast. I would like to give a shout out to the author, but it's not really authored. It's just kind of a feature within the September-October 2025 Consumer Reports magazine. Anyway, so they did the fall prevention organized by room, and they started first in the bedroom, and they talked about optimizing the bed height. And I hadn't really thought about mentioning that before, but we do talk about it in rehab quite a bit. The bed height is important because when you have somebody who's trying to stand from a seated position, the most optimal situation is that their feet are flat on the floor. And so we can kind of go over why this would be important. So if the bed is too low and you're basically sitting with your knees up above your hips, so your feet are flat on the floor, but the bed is so low that your bottom kind of sits below the level of your knee, that's a disadvantage, and it can make it much more difficult to go to a standing position. And I'm sure all of us have at one point sat in a chair that was really low or too low for us, and you kind of have to sneak your heels back as best you can and lunge forward to get up into a standing position. And so when the bed is too low, that can be a problem. And you're going to need a lot of core strength and upper leg strength to be able to stand from that position. And then, of course, if the bed is too high and your feet are dangling and not making contact with the floor, you kind of have to jump off the bed, if that makes sense, or push your body forward and then kind of make contact as you're in motion, which is also not ideal. And so one of the first recommendations they make is to optimize the bed height. And that could be like actually changing the bed. At many stores, they'll have risers that you can put underneath the feet of the bed to make the bed go higher. If the bed is already too high and you can't make it go lower, sometimes a really nice sturdy footstool would be helpful. This can kind of be a problem if you have two people using the same bed, one that's really, really tall, one that's really, really short. And so that's where having like a really sturdy footstool may come in handy, as long as and I would suggest one that's rather wide, not one of those tiny little kind of 8-inch footstools, or a wide base. So when my grandmother was here, she had her daughter make, really honestly, it almost just looked like a crate, like the top of a crate. And then there was a cushion on top and it was wrapped with fabric. So it was homemade, but it was large. I want to say it was maybe 2x3, like maybe the size of a floor mat or something. And then she would get on and off her bed that way because her legs were too short, even in the lowest position of that hospital bed, for her to get in and out. They are recommending something called a step 2 bed or step stool, which is on the wider end of things and also has a handrail on the side. And they are quoting that at $212. So also in the bedroom, they're talking about replacing old carpeting. And part of that is because of the tripping hazard. So really old carpet can kind of bunch up in spaces or have changes in texture, elevation that could be unexpected, or catch your foot in just the wrong way and can increase the risk of falling. And so that can be a more expensive fix, obviously way more than $212 of the stool we just talked about. But in the grand scheme of things, you're going to want to invest more in the carpet and try to avoid things like the small throw rugs. And you can tell in some areas where, if there's a delay in replacing the carpet, or maybe there's some financial barriers, you'll start to see these little rugs pop up everywhere. And every one of those popping up could be another potential fall hazard. And so at some point, of course, finances permitting, maybe best to just go ahead and replace the carpet altogether, or maybe even move away from carpet if you want to go into something like a vinyl wood or something like that. The next that they put in the bedroom, although this is more of a idea of what you're wearing, is the non-slip footwear. They are suggesting a quote unquote, have a pair of well-fitting shoes reserved for use at home or slippers with rubber soles so that fully encase your feet, like these wool ones. And they are talking about shoe with a rubber sole, $140. That seems a little steep to me. I don't know if I'd pay $140 for those shoes, but the idea is instead of wearing socks. So one of the biggest issues is if you're having a lot of back issues or balance problems or difficulty reaching your feet, that lowers the likelihood that you're actually going to be wearing non-slip footwear, and you might just be putting on regular cotton socks. And that can be some of the worst things to walk in. For one, cotton socks on any kind of smooth surface is a higher risk for falling. There's no friction, right? So the socks can go out from underneath you. And two, the socks themselves don't help you with any kind of balancing as you would find in really good footwear where you have a platform that the foot is sitting on, which is the sole of the shoe, maybe some inserts. Maybe the shoe is a little chunky around, and so it just has more contact with the floor. You can imagine just going around in little cotton socks, you don't have as good a contact with the floor, and the contact you do have has a much lower friction, and so that would increase your risk of falling. The next thing they talk about is Light the Way, which is basically just lighting, especially places between, say, the bed and the bathroom, places you go specifically at night. I mean, the chances you're going to be walking into the garden at night, maybe not as much, but walking to the bathroom, yes. And so making sure those commonly used pathways, especially pathways used traditionally at nighttime or in darker situations, are well lit. Here they're talking about the clapper, which kind of cracked me up because I didn't even know they still made the clapper, which is where you use your voice activated or clapping sounds to activate the lights. That was like always a joke when I was a kid, and I guess it's still a thing, and it is listed at $23. But I always find lighting to be one of the cheapest ways to avoid falls. And because many falls happen at night when there's low lighting, or maybe there's an obstruction on the floor that you don't know about or not anticipating, that is really one of the cheapest and most cost-efficient ways to help improve the safety of the home. Next, they move into the bathroom. They talk about installing sturdy grab bars. Of course, that's really important, especially next to things like toilets or showers or areas where you need to frequently come from a seated position to a standing position, or you're in a slippery area or other area where falls are most common. Here, they're recommending the Designer Series grab bar ranging from $47 to $120. And oh, cool. They're actually quoting somebody from the University Health in San Antonio. Oh, I need to reach out to these people. Anyway, so ideally you want to have these professionally installed and anchored to the studs. I have seen many, many falls happen where somebody grabs some sort of like towel rack or some other item within the bathroom that's just installed into the sheetrock. And so the towel rack and the sheetrock go down with the patient. I will tell you how that ends up working out. And so having somebody that could come in and install these into a stud, that little extra investment, I think at that point is going to be a much safer situation. I have seen some grab bars that end up almost with like a suction type install, especially in flat surfaces like on the walls in a bathroom. I don't have any good data on those other than to obviously say it's much better if we can have it installed permanently into the wall, especially into studs. But if that's all that is available, I mean, that's going to be better than nothing for sure. They talk about a non-slip floor treatment, which is different than a mat, like an actual treatment. And this is for bathtub or shower floors when they get wet. And you can basically apply a product that will increase the friction in that area. So you can think of it like a grainy application that instead of being slick, that it would create some sort of friction or stoppage of any kind of material moving across it. So they are recommending the no skidding anti-slip porcelain bathtub treatment. $25 for 8 ounces. Don't ask me how many of those you need for what size bathtub. I have no idea. But anyway, super interesting. So the next thing they're recommending is to skip the bathtub mats. And I know you know what I'm talking about. They look like octopus tentacles on the bottom. They have little suction areas, and you can either put those right outside the bathtub or actually inside the bathtub. I feel like I grew up with these. Like maybe we had some in the bathtub, or I don't know. But what they're recommending instead is actually these applications that you can put more like stickers. So they're recommending the Kahuna Grip Non-Slip Safety Bath/Shower Treads. $16 for a 5-pack. And these are non-slip stickers that you can put customized in areas, maybe right outside the shower or inside the shower itself. And then you can put as many as you need in an area specifically where you know somebody may be stepping. And again, all you're trying to do is to increase the friction in that area. And if you've ever slipped and fallen, like I have recently as March, in a slick bathroom out of town in a hotel, you'll very quickly appreciate that when there is these like slick marble or stone floors or concrete floors, any friction you can get is definitely better than none. So moving on, they talk next about the stairs, and that's something I haven't talked about a lot. I thought this was really interesting. They talk next about stairs, and I think stair safety is really important. I don't, as you've probably learned, live in a house with stairs, except for stairs up to our front door. But and I've never lived in a 2-story home. But there are many people that either the long-term home has a 2-story house, or they've moved in with someone else who is in a 2-story house. But talking specifically about the stairs, they started first with speaking about the handrails, preferably having them on both sides. I've been in some homes where the handrail's only on one side, then you kind of just have the wall on the other side. But preferably having a handrail on both sides, and suggesting that smaller rounded handrails can be easier to hold on to. So you basically want somebody to be able to fit their whole hand around the rail for stability versus saying a really large, chunky handrail or even a decorative one that isn't easy to grip and kind of hold on to for stability. And I think overall, just making sure that the handrail itself is stable and checked at some interval if it looks like it's wobbling or has some other issue with it. That is basically the main safety going up and down the stairs. And then also, in addition to the going back to the friction, how easy it is to go up and down the stairs. And so they're talking next about anti-slip treads or strips of slip-resistant tape. And you can put that on the uncarpeted steps to make more traction. And so this would help you with, either ascending the steps or going up the steps, and you need to have a good grip as you're moving one or advancing one foot up over the next step and then alternating. And then especially going down the steps as well, that you want to have something, especially at the edge of the step, that can help catch that foot before it flies off. And then you end up having a fall associated with the stairs. So they're recommending 3M safety walk tape, $51 for a 1-inch by 60-foot roll. And this tape is yellow. I think that's also for the visual change for the edge of the steps. If you've ever looked at steps that are all the same color all the way down, visually it can be very difficult, especially looking down the steps, to judge the depth perception. And so when you do something to delineate the edge of the step going down, maybe aesthetically it doesn't look as good, or maybe a designer could help with this. But the idea would be that you're distinguishing the edge of the step visually, and so that when your brain is planning to go down the steps one by one, that it's assessing visually where the edge of that step is. And so that can be very helpful as well. So this tape is yellow. Again, I don't know that I've ever seen bright yellow tape at the edge of the step, but hey, could work, could be a good option for some people. The next is really avoiding carrying too much up and down the stairs, such as laundry or heavy, unwieldy baskets full of things. They talk more about using, like for laundry, they're actually suggesting getting a mesh laundry bag and throwing the laundry down the stairs versus walking down the stairs, which I think is pretty clever. Again, I've never lived in a 2-story house, so I can't really comment on this. But yeah, I don't know if I would like it if my kids were throwing laundry down the stairs in a laundry bag, but if it made their fall risk less, I guess that's okay. So they're talking about finding ways to have multiple trips up and down the stairs with less items and trying to manage a large or awkward item up and down the stairs. So I think that makes sense. The next thing they talk about is, again, kind of on the lighting, but this was specifically with the staircases, even outdoors, like things that are like decks that have stairs that go down to the backyard or something like that. So they're suggesting JSOT outdoor solar deck lights for $55. And then they have another option for decorators 4x4 solar outdoor post cap lights for $15. And the idea, again, is to try to bring lighting. Now, when you think about deck lighting or any kind of outdoor lighting, one of the main issues is always, do you have electricity in that area? And not everyone has electricity out to the edge of the deck. And so the reason I'm sure they're suggesting the solar lights is the idea is that they charge during the day and then light up at night. as one way to get around the lack of electricity in those areas. So the next thing they're recommending, and I actually thought this was interesting, they said if you do fall and you take a tumble and hurt yourself, they go through some different medical alert systems that could be helpful. They're mentioning subscriptions that can range anywhere from $20 to $60 per month. And that would be some sort of pendant or bracelet or some other kind of monitoring system where you could either detect the fall automatically or have a button that's pressed that alerts somebody else. So you can kind of think back to the old school, I've fallen and I can't get up type situations. That would be where they would have something that buzzes somebody else. I can tell you the main issue with these items is that they need to be on the person. And we had one of these for my grandmother, but she didn't wear it. And so eventually I think we even turned off the subscription because she just never wore it. And so you could do all of the encouragement and reminders in the world, but if somebody gets up and gets out of bed and doesn't have the necklace or the bracelet on, then that's kind of it. I mean, it's not going to help you if it's on the nightstand. The other issue with these is also charging. So if you have something that requires charging every 24 hours, well, that's a whole other thing to manage, right? And so if you're getting up in the middle of the night and you really have to go to the bathroom, you might not be thinking, well, I better go get this thing off the charger in case I fall. That's like the last thing you're thinking about. You just want to get to the bathroom on time. And so anyway, I've never found the monthly cost of these to be too cost prohibitive. They've always seemed fairly reasonable. The problem is the adherence to wearing it and getting, somebody to use them. Now, if I had to pick between something that automatically detected a fall versus somebody having to push a button, obviously I'd like one that does both, that has both functionality. But if I had to choose, I would pick the one that does automatic detection, because one of the issues after a fall is you can become disoriented, assuming you're even wearing, the device itself. But say you do have a head injury and you become disoriented or you're unconscious, you're not going to be reaching for the button and making a coherent cry for help at that point. And so, comparatively, I guess if it was between one or the other, I think automatic fall detection would be better. The next thing they talk about are smart devices, specifically like having an iPhone or maybe an Alexa, which is the Amazon version, or Hey Google, or any of those things around so that if somebody was on the floor, they could call and ask for help. Again, like I just talked about, one of the issues is you're assuming that they didn't have a head injury at the same time, or they haven't fainted or something horrible like that. That they're coherent enough to call and ask for help. When Nana was here, I trained her how to do that, and she could never kind of repeat it back to me. And so we would have an Alexa in the room, and I would teach her how to call us on the Alexa machine. I would teach her how to ask for help. We set up this SOS type system, and the 2 times she did fall here, that was not what she went to use. She just ended up yelling and we heard her and then obviously came to help her. So those are great, again, with the caveat and the limitation of people have to be able to use them and use them when they're scared or hurting or disoriented or confused. And so the more complicated it is, and of course in a controlled situation, it might be easy. And you can say, oh yeah, you just call and ask for help. But really those kind of ambient listening systems, they're a good layer of support. I don't know if they are a full layer of support. So at the end of this article, they go on to talk about Android phones also having an emergency SOS function, very similar to asking for help. They said Apple Watch models starting with Series 4 have emergency call functionality and can detect falls, and then Android smartwatches do as well. But they put a note in here that Consumer Reports does not test smartwatch or smartphone safety function, so they can't speak to that. But they do include a Samsung Galaxy Watch that is $230. So they have a few other tidbits I thought were pretty interesting. They talk about the toilet seat or seat attachment that sits 17 to 19 inches above the floor can help you feel more stable when you sit or stand. And that's called an elevated toilet seat or a higher toilet seat. And so if you're replacing a toilet, you can just choose, usually the price difference is negligible, a higher toilet seat, or you can add an attachment that raises it. And again, that goes back to that discussion about the bed. And so if you basically are able to sit on the bed and have a 90-degree angle with your legs, that's the best situation for you to be able to stand safely with less risk of falling. And so you're kind of adapting that over to the toilets as well. And for a lot of people, like in the bathroom where the kids were using, we bought kind of the standard lower toilet in that area. And you can tell when you use it, it's actually not as easy to get up and move as it is in the other toilets in our house, which are all at the higher level of 19 inches. And so another thing they added here was cleaning the stairs. That's kind of interesting. I miss maybe like some guy in the Consumer Reports had some story about some neighbor or something that fell cleaning the stairs, but they are definitely recommending a handheld or canister vacuum is safest. And I'm like, well, okay, so what were people using? Like a regular vacuum on the stairs? Maybe like a corded large vacuum? That would be a lot of work. But again, I've never cleaned carpeted stairs in my life. So yeah, so they are recommending a handheld or canister vacuum. That's safest. They recommend trading a towel-style bath mat for a textured rubber backing that will adhere better to the bathroom floors. So instead of having those bath mats that you throw down that are kind of like a fabric or almost like a carpet looking thing, to go ahead and get with the rubber ones that have the rubber backing and the best adherence you can get down to the bathroom floors. Because again, if it's going to stop you from slipping, it can't also slip. So that would be helpful. They do recommend, if you are choosing carpet, to use dense low pile carpet. Offers better traction on the stairs and better traction in general than carpet with a higher pile. So that means basically that really thick, tall luxury carpet, which is not as good for fall prevention, and maybe looking more at the lower pile, kind of tighter knit carpet. And then the last thing they mention is placing a motion activated light near your bedroom so that when you walk into the bedroom, you can see well and entering the room. I'd say yes, but I would really focus on putting that lighting towards the bathroom. That's really where you're going to see most of those falls. And the cool thing is they actually put a little layout, like a picture in the background of this article, and it has the 19-inch toilet seat. It has the textured bath mat. It has the little step to bed step stool going on. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So way to go, Consumer Reports. Thank you for recognizing home safety and fall prevention. And thank you everyone so much for listening. I hope this was helpful. Please think about checking out the Consumer Reports edition for this month. Maybe buy a couple, leave them in opportune places when you go travel for the holidays. Maybe more people can benefit from them. Thank you so much for listening and have a great week.